Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jem, a VTuber that grew up loving games and the creative process behind them. From monster designs to impactful narratives, video games have been a creative and unique experience to have. So I'm honored to have the chance to have a conversation with Mike from Comp3 Interactive, an indie developer responsible for 2023's PS1 style slasher Rewind or Die. This is the first time that I'm getting to sit down with someone to discuss video games, and hopefully it won't be the last. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. So we're fortunate enough to talk to Mike from Comp3 Interactive about Rewind or Die. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm super excited to talk about video games and learn more about the video game that you developed, which is Rewind or Die. So Mike, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm excited that the time zones allowed us to have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I've been a big fan of the game since I got to play it. I saw some YouTube, playthroughs, and it piqued my interest. So I decided to stream it on my own channel. So I'm super duper excited to actually hear more about the creative process. It's such a unique game, especially when you're pulling nostalgia and you're trying to bottle it. So when thinking of the concept of launching a retro style video game, a slasher with an homage to days of VHS rental stores on every block. That isn't one that you'd think of every day. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired that specific setting?
Well, originally, Rewind or Die was a very different game. It went through a lot of different iterations before this final release that everybody got to play. Originally, it was a bit more of a like run-of-the-mill walking home simulator, which wasn't a unique idea by any stretch of the word. So originally, you were finishing the shift at a completely different shop or store, if you want to call it that. If we're going American, we'll call it a store. You were walking home and you'd nip into the VHS shop to pick up like a tape and some snacks. This was all just the introduction. So essentially, your interaction with that VHS shop was just as a customer in the original build of the game.
Oh, wow.
Uh, Something would happen in there. At this point, like I say, I hadn't really ironed out all the fine details yet, but something would happen in there and you'd inadvertently piss off the shop owner who'd threaten you and kick you out. You'd continue on your merry way home just to realize you're being followed. And then the rest of the game was you trying to just find your way home through empty streets in the middle of the night, hiding and avoiding Slaw, who would at the end have turned out to be the shop owner. Wink, wink. But yeah, that changed pretty early on. It just didn't feel right. It wasn't overly engaging as in a game concept. Nothing new was in there. You were just doing. It was basically a walking simulator and a press X to hide kind of thing.
Right.
But luckily, by the time I'd got round to ironing out a bit more of a fleshed out game, I was able to reuse a lot of those assets. So the scene at the start of the game where you're walking to the shop to start your shift, that those buildings and the cars and all the street assets were the majority of the game originally. It was like a maze of UK streets to hide and run around in. But yeah, managed to reuse all those and taking inspiration from a few films, such as like Motel Hell, for example. That
Oh,
was a big inspiration for this one, mainly for the inspiration for Slaw.
nice. What I'm hearing is you gave into capitalism and you put us to work. You
That I
unfortunately.
did.
I have to say, I really do love the VHS store setting as an opener. Like it holds a lot of nostalgia for me as somebody who grew up more poor. So I always love dropping trauma, so I'm so sorry. But we grew up poor, so a lot of the time we would rent video games or we would rent movies. So having that setting was really like the first thing that drew me into the game. The gameplay certainly reflected eras of video games that are long past. It brings us into the piggy pits of hell that you've kind of fleshed out in this new iteration of the game. So what feelings did you like want to convey in the first, second, and final act of Rewind or Die? Because that's how I view this game. There's three distinct settings. Is that the feelings that you wanted to convey, or
Essentially, yeah. So in the first act of it, which I'll I'll give the little breakdown of what I think or what are intended as the acts of it. So the first act being called into work and completing your shift. It was intentionally more like a monotonous feeling with like a little bit of light-hearted humor in there, just for breaking up so it's not completely boring. Everything's meant to feel normal to an extent, and then you got like this sprinkling of oddball characters, busy roadway outside. You've got your customers, different visitors, and co-workers in there. They all add to that feeling that you aren't alone, so nothing can actually go wrong. And as you start playing through that, eventually each one of those characters start to leave one by one, leaving you
yeah,
completely alone in the
yeah,
shop. So it's just like that slow build of you started with this entire group of people around you, and slowly one by one they're being not picked off because obviously they're not dying, they're leaving of their own accord. The customers they're leaving, but it's that kind of throwback to you start with a big group, you end up on your own, helpless. So that was
yeah,
the initial idea of that. Uh, and then obviously when everyone disappears, you're doing your final closing shifts, and you start to notice that something's off. There's a few eerie moments, a few just small scares building up to the first sighting of your victim of the first victim, sorry, in the alley, and then leading directly into the first appearance of the killer before he starts chasing you down. So
yeah,
that was the first act of it, just like that kind of build leading you into from a sense of security to running for your life, essentially. Next, obviously, you go into the slaughterhouse, stark difference to what you've just come from. So you've just been on like a standard UK street in a shop, everything seemed fine, and now you're in a slaughterhouse covered in blood and viscera. So I wanted to have like an immediate shock of a
mm-hmm,
different environment. Soon as you finish one, straight into another, completely different, and you're greeted by Slaw basically taunting you to your face. So that starts to build the sense of panic of like, oh shit, what am I supposed to do now?
right. Yeah, I think the first thing out my mouth when it changed into that new scene, I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" It was like a knife slice. It was such a stark contrast because to my knowledge, the only thing we had was the VHS store. So I was attributing it almost to like that the coffee house game that Chillis Art released, where you're just
Yeah,
running the VHS store or something. No, it was so much better than
I,
that.
I did have that thought in my mind. Like, obviously, some of the marketing material for it did show other elements of the game, but in my own tweeting of it, I did try and make it seem like, oh yeah, it's just another one of these run of the mill games. Then
Right.
you end up playing it, and it's something it completely sideswipes you when you get kidnapped.
It's one of those games where you're pleasantly surprised. Like you thought it was going to be one thing and then all of a sudden it has this extra flair to it. It provided a lot of literal panic because I can handle a VHS store. I don't know if I can handle a slaughterhouse.
Yeah, that's definitely one place I wouldn't want to be myself. But then, obviously, after that, we start going into that third act, which is the sewers, which everybody loved. I've heard some stories about that one, so live and learn from that. But the idea with that was originally I did plan to have that kind of stalker presence inside of the slaughterhouse. I've got a build with that somewhere on my computer at the moment, but with the given the size of the slaughterhouse, it didn't give you that much freedom. So like there was no prolonged chase or anything like
Right.
that. It was like he would see you in one room, and to make it like any sort of fur, it would need to lose you immediately as you went into the next
Right.
room. So I thought I'm gonna need a new area because I do want this kind of like this sense of panic, this stalker killer chasing you,
Right.
mainly as like a homage to like the old school Resident Evil games. They all had the
Right.
stalker in those. You had like Mr. X, the
Yeah.
Tyrant, and then
Lisa
Nemesis.
Trevor. Yeah, Lisa Trevor in the original one. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
it was a very interesting fight or flight for that one, and you did give us a taste of it when you originally started the transition from the VHS store into the slaughterhouse. So I'm glad that you were able to do it more than that like 20-second segment. When you're in the alley and you're running away, it was me screaming the entire time playing.
well, one of the other things I still haven't found out why a ladder in a sewers leads up to the upstairs room in a slaughterhouse. But if you don't pay attention to map design,
And
it's fine.
it's fine. Listen, we have Final Fantasy games that do weird stuff. It's fine. It's fine. Who needs logic when we have
No,
it's fantasy. It's a horror game fantasy RPG. Let's just call it that.
exactly. If you're being chased by a killer wearing a pig head as a mask and you're questioning why a ladder doesn't make sense, then you've got your priorities a little bit mixed
Well,
up there.
there's a few Easter eggs that don't make sense. So, it's just part of it. It's good theming. We'll call them. Bob Ross calls them happy little accidents. A lot of journalists like to cover these games when these come out. I think one of the new trends, especially for indie developers, are the PS1 era, the low poly kind of video games because they're simpler to make than a big budget, AAA title. So a lot of these games, people like journalists are attributing it to Puppet Combo, but Torture Star, who is Puppet Combo's publishing company, really seemed to help, bring in and usher in a new wave of developers. Did partnering with Torture Star really help elevate your game to the next level as opposed to publishing independently?
Yeah, so Torchester reaching out and publishing eventually Rewind the Die, it was probably the best thing that could have happened for the game.
Let's go.
Prior to it really was. So prior to this point, I'd made two similar styled that PS1 kind of styled game. It was the 13th Floor and the Keeper. Both were really short experiences, bit of practice, just because, like I
Hmm.
said, they were the first two that I'd made. They didn't garner a huge amount of interaction because, like, who am I? You know what I
Right.
mean? There's two free games popping up on itch along with thousands of others. So the difference between having the publisher for that with like such a strong following like Puppet Combo does, it's just like astronomically different. The sales of the game far exceeded my own expectations, and it's opened doors for me going forward with future projects for additional funding or a bit of security, knowing that like if I do work on another game, it could be published by him again. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I would do that again in a heartbeat.
Awesome. So I love capturing these moments in my mind. Do you remember like how did they reach out to you? Do you remember like the instance that they offered or the conversation that it happened like they want to publish Rewind or Die?
It's a bit less glitz and glamour this one because
Damn it.
prior to publishing this, yeah, prior to publishing this, I did already work with Puppet Combo a little bit. I did some 3D modeling work for Stay Out of the House, so I was already in contact with him, and he'd obviously seen progress on Twitter, and just during a chat that we were having, he mentioned the publishing opportunity for it.
Nice. I think that I think I think that overall the work that Torture Star has done for indie developers is it there's a cult following for this. Just like those weird B-list, C-list horror movies from like the 80s. There's a cult following for these. So I'm really glad that Rewind or Die had that support. It seems like without it, you may have not gotten to the level that you guys deserve with this game. So I'm just so happy for you.
I'm happy
um,
as well. I'm glad somebody else is happy, but yeah, I'm happy about it as well.
I mean, you even got the nomination for the indie, was it the horror game awards? I think, or
I
indie.
did.
So that's still
Yeah,
something
the indie
big.
game. Yeah, I'm ecstatic at that. When I found that out, I was jumping for joy a little bit.
You got to print out the nomination and put it on your fridge like you were a proud
Oh,
parent.
it's going on my CV. That
Let's go.
nominated, yeah, award nominated game dev.
Let's go. You mentioned that you published two other games. So, the PS1 era of gaming, it allows a lot of flexibility with development and modeling and storytelling. On itch.io, you have these two other games, I think is what you said. So, The Keeper and The 13th Floor. Admittedly, I like to be a very honest person. I have never heard of these games before. Not to your own discredit, I don't particularly go to itch.io that often. So can you tell me about these games? Tell me about some experiences, maybe the synopsis, and let me promote you as well as learn more about two video games that a friend has developed.
Yeah, so like I said, they're nowhere near as fleshed out as Rewind was. Both extremely short experiences. We were talking between 15 minutes and half an hour. That's it.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, the 13th Floor was the first 3D and also the first PC game that I'd ever made. Before that, I was more focused on mobile games, which the less said about that, the better. They were never going to go anywhere.
But you did develop these smaller games, the Keeper and the 13th Floor. Which one came first?
Yeah, so 13th Floor was the first game. So essentially, that was me just checking if I knew enough about the Unity engine itself to make a more fully fledged game. So essentially, it's just the player walking around an empty hotel hallway and invading other people's room with no real rhyme or reason behind it, other than a few scattered notes around the area that allude to something's going on. I was really proud of it at the time, but in reality, it isn't really a game. It's just go from point A to point B, small jump scare, point C, jump
Right.
scare ending games done. But like I said, at the time, that was something big for me because that was the first time I'd ever worked in 3D. It was the first time I'd ever made my own game assets. It was the first time I'd ever tried my hand at a first person controller, interaction systems. So it did teach me quite a lot. Then I think it was about 3 months later, I was trying to think about, right, where do I go next? And I saw a post about a game jam from the Haunted PS1 community, and I thought, go on, I'll give it a go at that. I think it was 2 weeks we had to make a game, and that turned out to be the Keeper. So in all, I made it in about 13 days from start to finish from scratch.
Oh,
This one's a bit more of a story based walking simulator. Again, it's very short, but there was a few more effects in there. There was like the addition of like music and more of a sense of a story than the 13th Floor had. So it was a step in the right direction, but again, it's still a very short game and something I still do enjoy. I did watch quite a lot of people play that one when it came out. It did do kind of all right, that one. It did appear in the like the top section of itch for a couple of weeks.
nice.
So quite a few people did play that one, but again, a lot of the feedback was like, oh, is that it? Because it was so short.
Right. But it's overall, I feel like I'm a big, it's funny, I'm a pessimist, but I'm also like an optimist when it comes to growth. So without those experiences, I don't know if Rewind or Die would be what it was. How long ago did you develop this? Those two games, by the way? What years were those?
Oh, so Rewind to Die was last year. It was in
Uh-huh.
development for about 7 months, I think. I'd probably say it was probably about 2020, 2021.
Oh, so this was a COVID hobby. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the jump from I'm publishing on itch to I have a video game. It's such a crazy feeling. Like knowing that you have a fully published game that is out in stores and people are able to purchase it. And I hope that you're really proud of that.
I am. It still doesn't feel real to me either.
I think that you did a really good job making that leap and partnering with Torture Star. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of support with the PS1 era, like low poly chillest art puppet combo like storytelling community. So I'm super proud of you that you went from itch.io and you learned something from it over to what you did now. So we mentioned it very briefly. Is there any fun Easter eggs that you want to talk about in the game? I unapologetically was in stitches talking about the porno titles in the VHS portion of the game. It, like I said, one of the things I love most about this game is it does capture that going to the VHS store in like the 80s and the 90s, making it an event, go pick up a movie, but it does spark times where I accidentally fumbled into areas that I should not have been in as a kid and getting yanked out of the store. So tell me about it. Is there any other Easter eggs besides porno titles?
Well, yeah, didn't we all have that experience? Well, yeah, the movie titles and the porn titles were actually a drunk idea between me and Matt Law, the voice actor for Cap. We were just chatting one night, and we had the idea of having an objective that involved novelty movie titles, which were like obvious callbacks to real films, but changed enough so I didn't need worry about being sued.
Copyright. Disney
Uh,
will get you. Don't worry, they own
oh yeah,
everything.
they'll find a way for have me. But yeah, I think there's more titles in the game than people realise, because each playthrough you'll get a randomised set of tapes to put away as part of your objective.
Really?
In total, I think there's about 60, between 60 and 70 combined novelty names across all of the genres.
I didn't know that. I thought everything
Yeah.
was I thought everything was completely pre-generated.
We just sat there on Discord one night and just cranked out a list. I think I was going through like lists of like 80s and 90s films and just trying to come up with a pun for each single one of them. And Matt was
Nice.
obviously doing the same, and we just combined the best ones that we had. And yeah, there's about between 60 and 70 in total. So
That's awesome though. So the VHS names, anything else?
well, the more obvious Easter egg in that VHS shop is going to be the Flappy Bird arcade game, the playable game.
Yeah,
That
let's
was more of
go.
a that was more of a joke just for myself, because the first project I ever made in Unity, the engine that Rewind the Dice made in, was a Flappy Bird clone. Like a lot of other devs make a Flappy Bird
Oh
clone because
boy.
it's relatively easy to do. So it was just like a little laugh at myself, thinking like having the first project that I ever made as a tiny playable Easter egg in a full game that I've made just made me chuckle a little bit and made me happy really to see how far I've come and how much I've learned over those few years.
Was this a secret like Easter egg that you didn't hear feedback on?
Well, people tried it. I saw some people looking at it and saw that it was a Flappy Bird arcade machine. A few people never played it, but behind the machine, if you were to beat the high score, is a small secret room.
Oh wow. What?
Yeah. Nothing game changing. It's just got a couple of little hints in there as to what's coming.
Oh wow. Hmm.
Yeah,
Huh.
you need that bit of perseverance to actually beat a high score in
I'm not
Flappy Bird.
good
So
at Flappy
not a
Bird.
yeah. Well, neither am I. I had to. I have a dev tool that that played the game for me, so I didn't have to beat the high score every time I wanted to test something.
Oh my god. Okay, so at least I'm not alone in that. Is there any other Easter eggs that you want to tell us, or do you want to wait for people to find them?
Well, I think the final one that I can think of off the top of my head would be in the sewers, the computer room with the worker in there. The computer screen itself has a website on there, very popular entertainment website on the screen. And even though it consists of about 15 pixels, it was just funny to see how many streamers instantly knew what that site was. And I think that can't they were cringing a little bit at it, but the fact that they knew what it was from that very tiny screenshot kind
Huh.
of says more about them than it does about
Huh.
me.
Are you gonna enlighten us, or are you gonna leave it up to people?
Well, it's the black and orange website.
The black and orange website. Yes, we'll leave it at
Yeah.
that. We'll leave it
Yeah,
at that.
so see, you know what I mean. Just by two colors, you know what I mean.
Yeah. So you developed this game. So you developed this game, and you're able to fit a few Easter eggs in. You're able to tell the story, and you were able to have gameplay that improved upon what you previously had. So that was your big complaint and your big feedback was the itch.io era, and now you have this fully fledged narrative game. So when coming up with the background and the theming of the game, it seems like you got it on lock. You're doing the VHS store, but now we're throwing in the antagonists. We're throwing in a pig killer. So tell me about like where that development started for monster design and antagonist design. You're competing basically with everyone's knowledge of a slasher. So you have the Jasons, the Freddys, and the Michaels, and then you throw in video games, and you have already what Puppet Combo has done with kind of their horror genre of slashers. Tell me about pig. Like, why pigs?
Pigs. I honestly, I don't know. I just thought the design was really cool. I was messing around in Blender one day. I was making different character designs. I was watching a film, which is one of the main inspirations for it. A lot of people think that it's heavily inspired by Pigsy from Manhunt, and it is. To be fair, the design, I did use Pigsy as a reference, but the actual idea for Slaw came from Firma Vincent in Motel Hell. I think I mentioned it
Right.
earlier. Uh, the idea in the film is he's a farmer who kidnaps people, butchers them, and sells the meat on the market. It's a
Oh.
really gory film. It's definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it before. But yeah, it's that kind of idea. So he has the slaughterhouse. He's kidnapping people. There's all these blood, viscera, bodies, and remains left around the slaughterhouse. And the clincher of it, just to show that he's selling that. I'm not sure how many people did notice it, but in front of the grinder, there's a box, and it just says Slaw's Meats.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of a little hint as to what was happening there. But a lot of that was taken from Motel Hell, and there are quite a few references and callbacks to that film throughout the slaughterhouse scene. So if you have seen it, you may have noticed it. If you haven't, if you watched the film, you might notice some little things that you spotted in Rewind.
I unfortunately have never heard of Motel Hell, but I just Googled it, and my God.
Yeah.
My God. It is I can see the inspiration, and it listen, if this movie Motel Hell was even a fraction of how nerve-wracking Rewind or Die is, you're in for a good time with this.
Well, we can thank me dad for that one because it was one of the films that he let me watch when I was way too young.
Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah, I unfortunately yeah, my mom was a bit, and probably that's why I'm more inclined to play the horror games. My mom was a huge horror fan. So I mean not good horror. Not good horror, but I grew up with Crypt Keeper, like Tales from the Crypt. Chucky was a big thing that scared me as a child. So we had a lot of horror movies in the house. Not like My Little Ponies, but no, horror movies.
Well, I actually added my dad into this game. That just made me think another Easter egg in it. in the VHS shop behind the counter, there's a kind of like a wanted poster for a bloke. It just says like "Do not allow on premises," and that's just a picture of me dad.
He started it all. He started it all. So he is
He
wanted.
did. He has to be in there.
That's awesome though. I think that you did some really cool stuff with the game, and I really do hope, as a fan, like I'm not, a journalist or anything like that, so I hope that the reception has been pretty well received. I found out about Comp3 Interactive mainly through Puppet Combo, but I'm a huge InSim fan. So I have, a smart TV and I put YouTube up. So I'll have some Let's Play streamers, play in the background while I'm working. And InSim played Rewind or Die, and I had to try it out for myself. How has the reception been since you launched Rewind or Die?
Oh well, yeah, I'm exactly the same. I like having just random let's plays on in the background just while I work. It gives you, well, it's like a little bit of background noise, a little bit of a break from it, and then you also get a little bit of inspiration if they're playing some decent games.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love watching people play my game, especially. I've watched a ton of streamers play through Rewind. First couple of weeks after it was released, I was on Twitch and YouTube daily, just jumping into people's streams, mainly just to hear the feedback directly from the players as they're playing it. So I wouldn't really announce that I was there for the most part. I'd just stay like watching from the shadows
Right.
kind of thing. And I'd be able to get that unfiltered feedback from players who were inadvertently telling me everything that I want to know without feeling the need to kind of sugarcoat it. Because
Right.
if you directly ask somebody who has said, "Oh, I love your game," will give me some feedback. The the feedback from that is never really. I'm not
Right.
saying it's never valuable because obviously they will have general criticisms that they will address with you. But if you're watching somebody play, you can see if they're stuck at a part for 15, 20 minutes.
Let's not talk about that.
They,
Let's not talk about that.
well, yeah,
The
yeah.
door. I couldn't exit the fucking door in the first part. I don't know if my game glitched. I was like, how do I open the door to leave my
Don't
apartment for like
don't no don't go blaming the game glitching. There's no glitch on that front door. That's skill issue.
I listen, I press keys. I clicked buttons. I spent a good like 10 minutes. What's going on? Why is the door not opening?
Well, you definitely didn't press the E key quick enough. Then.
I didn't know there was QuickTime events. It's
Oh no,
fine.
it's not quick time events. If you're just standing looking at a door, it's not going to open it. You need to interact with
Listen.
the door.
So you got feedback through lurking in people's streams,
Yeah.
and so I think I was playing around May. So I would say within the first like month I was playing, and there was only a couple maybe walkthroughs, maybe one or two. I looked it up recently, and it seems like a lot of people have covered the game, really liked playing the game. Um, so how do you feel having like a YouTube presence now? Like people are playing your game and there's proof of it for hours at a time as
It,
well.
it is still really weird. If I start scrolling through YouTube, every now and again I will just see a thumbnail for my game, and it catches me off guard a little bit. But without a doubt, content creators are just as important as publishers for the games. I mean, they get so many more eyes on the games than a tweet from myself or Puppet Combo or Torchstar ever could. And I mean, I've met so many amazing new people and content creators just from releasing this one game. I mean, like including yourself.
Oh,
I know you through you playing this game, and then I've hopped into your streams prior to this.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm glad that you know me through the game and not through my horrible tweets. But I agree. I think that content creation, a lot of people, including myself, like to clown on video game players. But when video game players have the power to create content, it is its own marketing tool. Circling back to my original question, I love marketing. Can you tell? What is your favorite reaction like that you've received? Is it the feedback, or is it somebody shocked at like the ending or something like that? Like what has stood out for you?
a lot of the parts that I actually skip to if I'm going to be watching a stream is a scene towards the end with the incinerator room and Cap. So I just like seeing some of the
Yeah.
reactions to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I do too. So, anyways, we'll talk about the incinerator room in a second. In
Yeah.
a second. Um so going on, when you're creating this game, you learned from your first two creations, but this one is a mix of the small scale exploration, stealth, and then the puzzle solving aspects. So it's a very diverse game for the length of the game that it is. You're pulling in different genres. Was this always kind of the goal, knowing the feedback that you've gotten from the first two games? And what made you choose to connect all three of these genres into one game?
Well, like I said at the start, Rewind went through a lot of different iterations before settling on something I thought was worth playing. Uh, Originally, it was like going to be the same length as 13th Floor and The Keeper, just because I didn't. It was mainly down to self confidence more than anything. At the time, I didn't think that I was good enough to make something that was like a few hours long. I thought that was going to be way more work than I could do myself. But after making this first build, getting player feedback just from like friends, I'd send them a demo build, and they'd have some good ideas, and it slowly started snowballing until we hit this game. But maybe three completely separate kind of genres rolled into one was a bit much, but I think you're eased into each one enough just to settle in before the new content starts.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I really wanted to try my hand at adding puzzles into a game like you'd find in the original Resident Evil games.
Right.
Like, I'd never really had those in games before. So, I didn't want to overdo them, but I want, but I put a handful in there. So you've got like the freezer puzzle and the basement shutter. They're heavily influenced by the original survival horror games. Like
Right.
to me, those two puzzles wouldn't be out of place in a Resident Evil game.
Right.
But it was really heavily influenced by that, and I did want to try and pay homage to it without directly copying it, if you know what I mean.
Right. No, I specifically remember the shutter puzzle and how it took you all across the slaughterhouse, and it was a really good it's a really good tool, like from a developer's point. It's a very good tool to get people familiar with the map while also being able to give them some jump scares every now and then. You jerk. The marriage between the exploration, the stealth and escape aspects, and the puzzle making or the puzzle solving really makes Rewind or Die feel like it fits in the genre of like the original mansion level in Resident Evil 1. So I commend you for marrying those and not just sticking to a walking simulator.
Thank you very much.
So we're gonna circle back to the incineration room, which is one of the I wouldn't say it's a hub, but you visit this room frequently. So tell me how you came up with the choices, because there is a choice that is involved with the incineration room. How do you come up with
Hmm.
these choices that lead off just a hair off of the linear story that you've made? You didn't make an RPG. You didn't make a multi-ended crazy game, but there's a few choices that you can make that adds a little bit of a twist. So we'll keep the spoilers to a minimum, but tell me how did you come up with these little illusions of choice in the game?
Well, yeah, like you said, the game up to that incinerator point was pretty linear. There was no choices or actions that had any real bearing on the game. And I really wanted something unexpected that would shock the player when they thought they were doing what was the right thing. But really, if you've not fully assessed the situation and you haven't read the 5 foot sign on the wall that's right in front of them, then it's not going to go well for you. And like I say, I've skipped through and I've watched pretty much everybody's reaction to this point, and I've seen a lot of people's face drop when they realise what's happened, and then slowly start to realise that, yeah, in fact, yeah, I could have avoided that. And it was also really hilarious to see some people uh, quit out of the game and restart the chapter
Oh my
just
god.
to validate that what they thought was right, and just like the look of happiness when they realised that they could actually make that different.
Listen, I just think it should be a 10-foot sign. That's just me, though. No,
It's the highest resolution
I'm
asset in the game, so you can read it clearly.
I'm sorry. Maybe you should have made this an Unreal Engine because we needed a little bit more clearer. Uh,
Just made that one sign in Ultra HD,
abs-
4K.
Absolutely. I'm just saying, like, wall to wall, like roof to ceiling or roof to floor. It's fun. Things with I'm not gonna spoil too much, but there is a dog. So if you guys are dog fans, there is a dog in game. Like little things like that are optional, right? Like they're completely optional.
Yeah,
Like
so to actually save Zack requires you to actually defeat a secondary final boss, which some people may not have found because it is relatively well hidden. I'm not
right,
saying it's like the Da Vinci Code or anything, but it's relatively well hidden. Um, but yeah, there's your original ending that's split into two,
right.
dependent on the outcome from that incinerator room, and then there's the additional part of it if you want to go and save Zack.
Right. And it's just those I want to say that you provide realistic anyone could make these mistakes options, and then you have the feel good options, and they're anyone could miss a sign. I'm just saying. Anyone could miss a dog. It's fine. But overall, you didn't change how like usually the endings go. It's just there's little allusions to choice and giving a little bit more content, and it doesn't feel like it drags on. So I appreciated that as a player, even though I still feel bad. But you
Go
know,
for splicing your little clip there at the incinerator room.
stop. I mistakes were made. Mistakes were made.
Tony, no, the gas. Turn off the gas.
I think I forgot to turn the gas off.
I
So
don't know if you knew that as well, but Zack in the game is actually my real life dog. I modelled him for the game.
we have twins. We have twin dogs because I
Yeah.
specifically remember tweeting at Comp 3 um that it looks exactly like my dog, and that's why I was so like freaking out. I was like, it's Flash, it's Flash. He's a little bit more gray now, but I was freaking out. And I think those small little touches, like that's what really I feel separates bigger video games from smaller games because it feels more personal, and being able to do something like that, like specifically going, I don't want to buy an asset of a dog, I want my dog in game.
Yeah, has to be done. He's in every one of my games. There's
Wow.
either, well, this is the first time he's actually been modelled and been an actual asset in the game. 13th floor, he's on a picture on the wall, and
Oh.
in Keeper, he's the writer of one of the notes. It's a bit of a less of a reference, but one of the notes is written by someone called Zach.
Aw, but those are so good. And I like having Easter eggs like that. They feel warm and fuzzy, but I'm a nerd, so if I could have Parker and Flash in all of my streams to some extent, I would. So I totally get it. So you said that he's in all of your games, but are you working on another game? Is he gonna make an appearance in another game? Is anything in development from you?
I am currently working on two separate projects. They're both drastically different from one another. one of which is very early stages, doesn't really have any full direction yet. So I'm not really going to talk about that one because I'm not sure where that one's going. But as for the second one, again, I don't want to give too much away
Oh
about it
no, it's totally
at this
fine.
moment. But I've been tweeting here and there about it, little bit of progress pictures and videos. Still don't have a name for it yet, but if you've been following me on Twitter, I did start development on it a few months ago, and I was under the working title of Red Core.
Okay.
So I'm still calling it Red Core for now, but the name doesn't really make much sense anymore since like the story changes. But this one is probably going to take me longer than any of my other games because I'm trying to make it more of like an actual game than a horror experience game. So
Hmm.
it's going to be more of an action horror with a bit of shooting element in it. If you think like early scenes of Resident Evil style in the house.
Right. Right.
So it's going to be enemies and weapons, limited enemies, but each time you have an encounter with an enemy, it is hopefully going to feel like a big deal.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, we're taking a lot of influence by the movie The Thing. So it's set in an Arctic research station. Uh, you get tasked with going in there, finding out why it's basically gone dark. There's been no communication for the last several months, and yeah, bad things happen. We'll leave it at that.
Bad things happen to good people. Isn't that the best premise for a video game? So you
So yeah,
go. Oh, sorry.
I
Go
am
ahead.
trying to find a. I am trying to find a way to slip Zach in there, but it's kind of hard to find a way to put a dog into an Antarctic setting when it isn't a husky. So
We had this
I'm
conversation. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, surely there's a desk in game that has a picture on their desk.
Oh yeah,
Forget the wife, forget the kids. You have to have a picture of your dog on your desk.
I do have a picture of my dog on my desk.
So you've gone from like 1980s 90s baby VHS blockbuster inspired slasher horror game to now this Arctic mystery with a dash of uh-oh, what's going on? So do you have an idea of when you're going to launch it? What stage are you in right now?
At this point, I couldn't give a date, and I couldn't even give a ballpark. I'm I'm working on it on my own again, so I'm trying to build it all up from scratch, a better code base to work from, and also making all these assets myself, including like animations and everything like that. So at the moment, I'm trying to mock out a few rooms, get some like lighting settings right and everything like that, and also working on like the utility functions.
Okay.
So such as well, like your interaction doors are an absolute nightmare in games. They might not seem like it, but there's a if you want to get a door right, there is a lot of things that you need to consider
Oh
for,
wow.
for that to work.
I can't even imagine the beta process of making sure, well, the alpha process of actually building the levels, and you have to think of how dum-dums like me are going to play the game.
Yeah,
So
there'll definitely be a 50-foot sign in here somewhere.
let's go. And then obvious press E to open this door. E. E. So it sounds like you're still having fun. You're still loving what you're doing. Um, we're reaching the end of this interview. Is there anything else that you want to let us know? Any teasers? Any facts that you had about Rewind or Die, or anything that you're just up to? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not Conan O'Brien. I'm just here to vibe.
Yeah, and I'm not the ideal guest. I have no idea. The only thing I'd say is if you're interested in following me, then you can follow me on Comp3Int on Twitter or X as it's meant to be called. No, it's not X. It's never going to be X. It's
Never,
always Twitter.
never.
But yeah, I'll be sharing quite a bit more information about that game probably early in the new year when I've got a bit more substance to show off.
Yeah, I think that following you on Twitter has been um a hilarious exchange. So if my listeners, oh god, I hate it. I sound like a pretentious person. So if anyone of my subscribers want to follow, please give them a follow on Twitter, X, formerly Twitter. You can expect updates. You can see behind the scenes. You can see promos from even Torture Star and Puppet Combo on their Twitter page. And you're really supporting an indie developer that is doing shit because they love it. And they love horror, they love video games, and they're a valued member of the community in a in a world where big budget games can launch and then get, canceled and blacklisted after they take people's money. So so support indie developers, support horror developers. Mike, it was amazing talking to you. And do you have anything else to say?
We're not talking about games in particular there, are we? Especially not games that were released the day before or anything like that.
No, never a day before. Never. I don't know. That's pretty last minute, in my opinion. I don't know. But Mike, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, and I'm super excited to see what your next project is going to be. I think that you did a really great job, especially considering you got freaking Puppet Combo to publish your game. Come on, that's a big freaking deal.
That is definitely a big deal for me.
It's a big deal. So I look forward to hopefully showering the Rewind or Die team with praise at my award ceremony that I'm doing at the end of the year. So you can expect some more thoughts on that in my experience with Rewind or Die then. Mike, as always, thank you so much, and I look forward to your next project.
Thank you very much. Speak to you again soon.
Yes, of course. Thank you, guys. Thank you.